I've been running campaigns now for over 20 years, and there is an old way of doing things and there's a new way of doing things. So when I was setting up campaigns 20 years ago, we actually used to run ads in the newspaper. The minimum viable testing campaign you could run was a quarter-page ad, and roughly speaking, it would cost about $8,000 at the time, so probably $20,000 in today's money. And you had to run effectively a $20,000 test to see if something would work or not. Basically, there was a way of doing things that we did in the early 2000s when we were building businesses with newspapers, but now there's a different way of doing things. In fact, a completely opposite way of doing things that works today. Let's talk about what has changed when running marketing campaigns from 20 years ago versus today in an analog environment versus a fast growth digital environment. Let me talk about the differences. Okay, so probably the biggest difference and the biggest place to start is product first versus audience first. So when I first got into business, what you would do is you would craft your product. You'd come up with an offer. You would have a brochure, an offer page, you'd have all of that print ready. You'd put lots of thought into what your product or service was. And then once you felt confident in your product and service, you would then take it to market. And taking it to market basically meant promoting it in newspapers or promoting it through traditional advertising streams. And you were essentially trying to find better ways to describe what you'd already created. So you were not flexible on the product or service, you were just flexible on the ways that you could possibly describe it. And this was a product first approach. Now today, the fastest growing companies are doing an audience first approach. They describe a problem, they describe a type of customer, or they describe a niche interest, and they invite people to signal that they're interested in that particular thing. So audience building could be launching a waiting list, it could be launching a discussion group, it could be launching an online workshop, it could be launching an online assessment, but it's essentially something that says, I relate to the problem, I relate to the desire for the outcome, I relate to the frustration, I relate to being that type of person with that type of issue. And essentially you're just opting in to be part of an audience to receive more communication. Probably the most effective strategies is joining a waiting list, expression of interest list, discussion group, newsletter, or joining even a social media page where you actually say, I want to follow along for more on that particular social media account. So essentially you're just opting in to be part of an audience. So audience first versus product first is probably the biggest distinction between 20 years ago and today. So the next distinction is the communications approach. What we used to do 20 years ago is sit around with copywriters and think of different headlines and hooks, and we'd basically write those and we'd look for clever ways to describe the product or service that we had. There was no data really involved, limited amounts of data. So what we might do is mock up a few designs for ads or brochures, and then we might put it in front of a few of our friends or put it in front of a few friendly customers and say, do you have a preference between A versus B? But ultimately, we were kind of doing a lot of this in secret before we would then run a public promotion or public campaign. So it was copywriters coming up with creative and then taking that and putting it out there in the public domain. The opposite happens today. We actually ask customers a lot of information about how they relate to the problem. We ask them for data, we ask them for signals of interest, and we interact with people before we create campaigns and content. So one of the most common things that we do is we launch a quiz, and on the quiz, people might rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the way that they relate to the problem that they're experiencing, or the types of outcomes that they want, or the inhibitors or frustrations that are getting in their way. We might ask people to describe things in a box where they write their comments or feedback. We might use a social media post where people comment or use their language to engage with the social media post. So we're doing all of that engagement with real life customers, with our real life audience before we're creating the campaign. And the reason we're doing that is that we want the campaign to completely resonate with the language that our customers use, with the scale of the problem that our customers perceive. We want to get all of that data, all of that information, and then reverse engineer a campaign that perfectly matches up to the way that our customers think about their problem and the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. So you can kind of imagine that if the customer has a hand-shaped problem or a hand-shaped outcome, we can come along with perfect hand-shaped communication, and it just fits perfectly like a glove, right? That's what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to guess, we're trying to do it based on the data. The third big difference is going mass market straight away or going far and wide straight away versus a staged approach with beta groups and test groups and then going big. So when I would launch a campaign 20 years ago, we would literally just take out newspaper ads and they would go out and they'd be distributed to millions of people. And then we'd sit back and see if the phones rang, literally see if the phones rang. And we went far and wide straight away. Our first move was far and wide because there weren't really many mini steps that you could take in between. So we weren't able to sort of spend a few $100s on ads and then spend $1,000 and then spend $20,000. We just had to spend $20,000. So this was essentially go far and wide straight away. What we do today is we test, we measure, we iterate, we test, we measure, we iterate, and we start with little groups, then bigger groups, then bigger groups. And to do this effectively, you need to understand a concept called statistical significance. Statistical significance is how much do we need to spend to extrapolate to a larger group? How much data do we need to collect to be able to understand a bigger group of people? So if we survey 30 people, that probably gives us an insight into 3,000 or 4,000 people, how they might think, if we collect the data correctly from those 30. So what we end up doing is we run a little group of ads, and those ads go out and get 30 clicks each. And then as a result of getting 30 clicks on each of those ads, we can see which ads perform better than the others. And then we kill off the ones that didn't perform, and we come up with another group of 5 or 6 ads, and we see which ones get 30 clicks. And then we go, okay, great, those ones performed, those ones didn't perform, so we kill off a few and we double down on the ones that work. We might try another round of creative, and then we run some more ads. Each time we're just really seeing which ones got 30 clicks for the cheaper. Now, I keep mentioning this idea of 30 clicks. I personally have found that there's 2 levels of statistical significance that I'm testing for. Level 1 is 30 and level 2 is 150. So I use the number 30 and 150 all the time when I'm testing, and I'm really looking for how expensive was it to get 30 leads? How expensive was it to get 150 leads? How expensive was it to get 30 clicks? How expensive was it to get 150 clicks? What percentage of people responded from a group of 30? What percentage of people responded from a group of 150? What I'm trying to do is get to a group that's big enough so that I can extrapolate and learn something from that group and then take it out to a bigger group. So those 30 and then 150 number are my key tools for understanding a bigger group, right? So that's statistical significance. So I'm doing little tests and expanding, little test, expand, little test, expand. And after about 5 or 6 iterations, that's where we can then start spending the big bucks. So rather than going all in with $20,000 straight away, we might do little tests for a few $100s and then build up to 20, 30, 40,000, maybe 100,000 a month worth of ads, because we've done the testing to get there and we know that as a result of the testing, we're going to get a great response. So one of the biggest changes in the last 20 years is the relationship between business brands, personal brands, and product brands. So it used to be that you would actually just run ads for product brands. What you used to do is say, here's the product, here's the features, advantages, and benefits of that product, and here's how to buy the product. And that kind of was the DNA of a good ad or a good campaign. What we started to notice was initially that campaigns that had celebrity endorsement or celebrity faces would get a better performance. That actually, if you put a face on the ad and it was a well-known sports person or a well-known celebrity, you would definitely get an uplift on the response from those ads. Then we saw these campaigns from Steve Jobs, where Steve Jobs was actually on stage presenting Apple. He was the CEO, he was the founder, and he was the voice of the business. And this kind of was a big deal in the early 2000s. We really didn't see a lot of CEOs who would be the voice of their business or the face of their business, who would demo their products and who would launch the campaign personally. And this was an amazing transformation. It's where a lot of business people started to see for the first time the deep power and connection that a CEO or a founder could get with a big audience, and that how they could become the celebrity face of their brand. And this is where I started to clock this idea of becoming a key person of influence for the first time. So what we discovered over the last 20 years is that the more that we can build the brand of the founder, and the more that we can turn that founder into a key person of influence who represents the product, who explains the features, advantages, and benefits, who invites people into the business, then we can get the highest response out of all the campaigns. So the highest performing campaigns 15 years ago and today are always the ones where the founder, where the CEO, where the leader of the business is adopting the persona of key person of influence, and they're personally inviting you to have a look at the product or service, or they're personally inviting you to be part of the business brand. So finally, I want to share with you this idea that has really changed, which is expanding into new geographies by just repeating what works. When we were running campaigns 20 years ago, it was very normal that you were fishing in a limited pond that was limited by geography. So for me personally, I started running newspaper ads in Brisbane, Australia, and the newspaper, the Courier Mail, would go out to all the people who lived around Brisbane, and you would basically get this audience of people who lived in a certain geography. And what would happen is pretty quickly they'd see your ads and then they'd kind of respond, and then it would die off, and you had to come up with new ideas, and it would respond, it would die off, and you'd have to come up with new ideas, because ultimately people had seen the ad before and it was the same group of people who were seeing everything. So you had to freshen things up every few months by changing things around. What I'm noticing now is that because we now live in a world where there's something like 2 billion people with fast internet access, and there's well over 1 billion people who speak English. You can talk to an audience globally, and it can go and go and go and go. And actually, you want to figure out what works, and then you want to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. We live in a world that's very noisy. We live in a world where people are getting bombarded with messages all the time, and you want to create signal rather than more noise. And to create signal, it has to be boom, 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 same message, same message, same message. You will hear me saying, stand out, scale up, make a dent in the universe. Stand out, scale up, make a dent in the universe, right? I will repeat some of those lines deliberately because I know that I want to be part of signal rather than noise. I want to share ideas that work over and over and over again. And what I'm discovering today is that many of the people who are connecting with us might be in Brazil, they might be in Canada, they might be in New Zealand, they might be in the USA, they might be in Bogota, they might be in Vanuatu. They could be anywhere in the whole world, and they're able to discover those messages. So the message can spread and spread and spread. And the mistake that many of you are making is that you do something that works, you do something that resonates and connects, but then you change it too quickly. And actually, we need to just repeat and repeat and repeat and create signal in amongst that noise. Here's some of the things that I just have done over and over and over again in the last few years. Every single week, I'm running an introduction workshop. We have it set up on Score app that people can opt in for that, and then they answer a few questions, they come to the workshop, and that works every single week. You can attend the workshop. I'll put the link somewhere around this video. We have online scorecards. People discover who we are, they fill in an online assessment or an online scorecard. Once they've done that, they actually quantify whether we can help them or not, and then they talk to my team, and we run those over and over and over and over again. We have mini courses now, and those are some of the most successful campaigns from the last 12 months have been mini courses, and we've figured out what works, and we've repeated it and repeated it and repeated it, and we actually see it just deliver 1,500 leads, 1,500 leads, 1,500 leads, 1,500 leads, month after month after month after month. So we find things that work, and then we digitize them, we make them freely available, we put them out there, and we now have lots of things that work, and we've actually turned those into digital assets that repeat and repeat and repeat. So we went through the process of refinement, and then we go through the process of repeat what works to a bigger and bigger and bigger audience. Keeping in mind that today, it's almost limitless, the number of people that you can connect with globally. Things like repeating the workshop, repeating the scorecards, repeating the mini courses, repeating the expression of interest forms. Once you've got those right, and you can set all of those up on scoreapp.com, you just want to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and just let it keep working and keep working and keep working. Okay, so those are 5 big things that I've noticed that have changed in the last 20 years. What have you noticed? What are some of the things that you've noticed? Leave me a comment below. What have you noticed that's changed over the last 20 years that you've been in business? Next week, we've got a great video that's coming out, a really good long video that I think you're not going to want to miss. Like and subscribe so they notify you that that's gone live next week as well. I'll see you soon.